Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes chapters 9 through 12. This marks the fifth and last sermon. This entire book has been divided up into 5 sermons. So let's chapter 9 and verse 1. For I have taken all this to my heart and explain it that righteous men, wise men, and their deeds are in the hand of God. Um, I suppose that's true of everybody, whether they're righteous or not, wise or not. But notice, righteous men, wise men, and their deeds are in the hands of God. Man does not know whether it will be love or hatred. Anything awaits him. God knows what our future is. We don't. God knows what our judgment is. And there's a sense, I hope we do, but maybe not. Yeah, I think there will be people at the final judgment that will be surprised. And that kicks off our theme. It's about the life now and a hint about what comes after. Verse 2. It is the same for all. There is one fate for the righteous and for the wicked. Now you say, wait a second, I thought righteous and wicked, they're going to do two different places. Here it's talking about the under the sun look, and the one fate that it's talking about is that everybody dies. And that's our theme. We're here today, and then we're not. So one fate for the righteous and for the wicked, for the good, for the clean, and for the unclean, for the man who offers a sacrifice and for the one who does not sacrifice. As the good man is, so is the sinner. As the swearer is, so is the one who is afraid to swear. Verse 3, this is an evil in all that is done under the sun. That there it is again, one fate for all men, whether good, bad, indifferent. Notice we're going to look at the bad here. Furthermore, the hearts of the sons of men are full of evil, and insanity is in their hearts throughout all their lives. Afterwards, they go to the dead. The good people, the bad people, everyone dies in the end. Verse 4, for whoever is joined with all the living, there is hope. My wife likes to say, she has an expression. She says, while you still draw breath, there is hope. That's biblical. That's right here in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 4. Surely a live dog is better than a dead lion. Now, we've seen the opposite idea before. Better are the ones who have come to the end. They can sort of look back and they can see where life went. There's no more surprises. But on the other hand, life is precious, and then you die. And that's the point that we're seeing here. So a live dog better than a dead lion. Of course, sometimes I think I'd rather be a live lion, but that's not necessarily the option. Verse 5, for the living know they will die, but the dead do not know anything. Now, we're not talking about the absence of life after death, except that hadn't been revealed. Remember, throughout most of the Old Testament, there's no clear revelation. I think it is revealed, but it hadn't been clearly revealed. So I don't think a lot of people saw it. There's no clear revelation until later on. Now, let me just say, for the record, Daniel chapter 12, verse 2, verses 1 and 2, I think that's pretty clear. And then in the last days, many shall rise from the dead. I think that's clear, but I'm not sure that had been written yet. So notice the living know they will die, but the dead do not know anything, nor have they any longer a reward, for their memory is forgotten. Indeed, their love, their hate, their zeal have already perished. They will no longer have a share in all that is done under the sun. And remember, we're only talking about under the sun. We're not talking about life after death, because that's the big, at least at this point in history, that was the big unknown. But we're going to see, before we get out of this sermon, we're going to see a very strong hint. But still, if we're talking about under the sun, when you're gone, you're gone. You're no longer here. Verse 7, go then, eat your bread in happiness. Now this is the application, because while you're here, and then when you're not, you're not. Enjoy the now. Go then, eat your bread in happiness, and drink your wine with a cheerful heart, for God has already approved your works. Let your clothes be white all the time, and let not oil be lacking on your head. While you're alive, live. Enjoy that which God has given. So enjoy today. That's point number one. But you do that because tomorrow is not guaranteed. You don't know how many tomorrows you have. It can be a surprise. Let me just say for the record, I think I mentioned this earlier in this class. About 15 years ago, I had a heart attack. I wasn't expecting that. I thought at the prime of health, and I was out in a fencing match and just having a great time, and all of a sudden it became difficult to catch my breath, and rescue workers came, and actually one of them was somebody I had trained uh, back in my days in fire rescue. But they came and they saved my life, and I was happy for that. And I've been enjoying each day since, seeing it as a gift from God. In a sense, I always did, but it brought it more to mind. And that's what the preacher is trying to do for you right now without having to have a heart attack for us. He's trying to bring that to mind that life is precious. Enjoy today because tomorrow is not guaranteed. Verse 9, enjoy life with the woman whom you love. That's one aspect of joy. Now, if you're not married, that's okay. Then you can enjoy it other ways. But if you are, that's a special thing in life, and it's something that my wife and I have had the opportunity to enjoy. We've gone past 50 years now. We're in the 50s so far as how long we've been married. Enjoy life with a woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life, which he has given to you under the sun. For this is your reward in life, and in your toil which you have labored under the sun. Enjoy that. There is a interesting parallel here in these words that we've just read. Here in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, beginning verses 7 and going all the way down to verse 9, with the Gilgamesh epic. And I mentioned an interesting parallel before. The Gilgamesh epic that was a bestseller way back then. It had been around for a long, long time. Notice this in Gilgamesh, here in Ecclesiastes, says, go then, eat your bread. Gilgamesh says, you Gilgamesh, let your belly be full. That's sort of the same thing in happiness and drink. Notice, keep enjoying yourself. That's sort of a happy thing. And do that. Look at down at verse 8. Let your clothes be white all the time. Here, let your cloth be clean. Um, we also have a reference to being white all the time and clean all the time. Notice, and let not oil be lacking on your head. Let your head be washed. It's interesting how it's really word for word. It could be. I like to think maybe that Solomon is deliberately borrowing from this earlier ancient document as he gives instructions on how to live for today. We go on into the next verse. Enjoy life with the woman whom you love all the days of your fleeting life. Notice the Gilgamesh epic. Gaze on the little one who holds your hand. That's not mentioned. But let a wife enjoy your repeated embrace. So the wife point. He notice the life that he has given you under the sun, such as the destiny of mortal men. Yeah, a gift. Of course, they didn't have the idea in the Gilgamesh epic of the one true God. But still, the language is borrowed here. We continue. We're going to leave the Gilgamesh epic behind us now. It was just those few verses. Verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do it with all your might, for there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you're going. Remember, Sheol isn't necessarily life after death. Sheol is just the grave, and that place of the dead, the tomb, the place where all activity is seen to stop. Again, this is an under the sun look. It's not looking at life after death. And the point that's being made, if it's worth doing, then throw yourself into it. Do it with all your might. Now, some things aren't worth doing, so don't do them. But if this is the thing that makes you tick, if this is the thing, I like to say, if this is the thing that God gifted you, that that thing that makes you just feel alive in a wonderful way, then do it and throw yourself into it. I think the point is, don't be afraid to take big bites. Go for it, do it. While you're alive, live. Verse 11, I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability. Notice how life is pictured as a race, a battle, bread, favor, wealth, all these things. The point that he's making is that it's not necessarily the people that are best at it, but rather, notice the closing refrain, for time and chance overtake them all. Again, you don't know how long you have. There's a there's a certain mystery to life. You can have everything planned. You can have your life insurance paid up, and all of a sudden, it all comes down to being in God's hands. He knows how it's going to end. You don't, and you don't know when it's going to end. One of the things that I saw in my fire rescue days is that accidents happen and things happen unexpectedly. And that's the point that's being made here. So time and chance, yes, the Bible speaks of chance. On the one hand, I think there's a sense in which God knows all things. So in God's hands, there's no chance, but there is from the under the sun perspective. Things happen in time and things happen in chance, and they catch up with everyone. Verse 12. Moreover, man does not know his time, like fish caught in a treacherous net, and birds trapped in a snare, so the sons of men are ensnared at an evil time when it suddenly falls on them. Tragedy happens. And here we're talking about tragedy. When your time comes, it comes, and you might see it coming, and you might not. You might not. Verse 13, also this I came to see as wisdom under the sun, and it impressed me. Now we're going to go into a story here. Verse 14, there was a small city with few men in it, and a great king came to it, surrounded it, and constructed large siege works against it. So little city, big king. The little city doesn't look like it has much of a chance. Verse 15, but there was found in it a poor wise man, and he delivered the city by his wisdom. And that's cool. That's wow, what an ending. But notice, yet no one remembered that poor man. Once he did his thing, then he was forgotten. Yes, the city continued, but they didn't bother to give him thanks. They didn't bother to remember him. Out of sight, out of mind. So no one remembered that poor man. And he looks at that story. Now here's the application. So I said, wisdom is better than strength. But the wisdom of the poor man is despised, and his words are not heeded. Because he was poor, yes, he gave some good advice, and it was just the right thing, and it saved the city, but afterwards nobody noticed. And so the wisdom of the poor man is despised. Now notice, by contrast, his words are not heeded. By contrast, verse 17, the words of the wise heard in quietness are better than the shouting of a ruler among fools. It's not necessarily who speaks loudest. It's not even necessarily who gets remembered that is the wisest. Verse 18, wisdom is better than weapons of war. And now there's a problem, because remember what we said about chance, and here's the chance. But one sinner destroys much good. One destroys all those praises that came previously. Chapter 10, verse 1. Dead flies make a perfumer's oil stink. So a little foolishness is weightier than wisdom and honor. What's the point? A little foolishness goes a long way. One can wipe out a whole bunch of, oh, that was great. A lot of praise. One bad step can bring to ruination. And those can happen just by chance. A little foolishness goes a long way. Verse 2, a wise man's heart directs him toward the right, but the foolish man's heart directs him toward the left. So notice a wise man's heart versus a foolish man's heart. And the point is, what is in you will lead you for good or for bad. What's in your heart? Is it wisdom? Is it foolishness? Is it righteousness? Is it evil? It's going to have an effect. Verse 3, even when the fool walks along the road, his sense is lacking, and he demonstrates to everyone that he's a fool. What's the point here? Notice he walks along the road. The result is going to be visible to all. What you are on the inside will eventually come out, and then everyone's going to see it. If it's wisdom, that's great. If it's foolishness, well, hey, that's going to be seen as well. Everything will be seen in the end. Verse 4, if the ruler's temper rises against you, do not abandon your position. Now, this is a little bit of a tough one. The ruler's temper, the term here, uh, ruach ha-mushal, the mushal from the Hebrew word mashal is to rule, so that's the ruler. But notice ruach is normally we translate that wind or spirit, the ruler's spirit. But I think temper is the idea. In other words, if he gets on your bad side, notice, don't abandon your position. The NIV renders that if a ruler's anger rises against you, do not leave your post, and then takes the rest of that line instead of because composure allies great offenses. Calmness can lay great offenses to rest, and I think that's probably the idea. Keep your cool. Don't just because you're being called on the carpet. Um, if you know you're right, be right. Um, don't blow it. Don't lose it just because an authority has called you up. Verse 5, there is an evil I have seen under the sun, like an error which goes forth from, and we're still talking about the ruler. We were doing that before. Here's the error, verse 6. Folly is set in many exalted places, while men sit in humble places. Just because he's a ruler, and now it's a different word for ruler here. This is the shalit. Um, uh, Same idea as one having authority. So it's a synonym, not the same word, but it's a synonym. Here's the point, that folly is set in many exalted places, while rich men sit in humble places. I've seen slaves riding on horses and princes walking like slaves on the land. And sometimes things get turned upside down. So again, don't sweat it. If the ruler gets stick with you, sort of hold your ground, not in a foolish sense, but if you're right, then be right. But what we have pictured here is the social order being turned upside down, and you can go in life, and all of a sudden everything gets turned around. Again, chance happens, chance takes place, and it takes place in personal lives, and it takes place in governments as well. Verse 8, he who digs a pit, again, this is talking about things that happen by chance. He who digs a pit may fall into it, and a serpent may bite him who breaks through a wall. You're not looking for, you break down a wall, you're not looking for it to get bitten by a serpent. You might be looking for other things. But verse 9, he who quarries stones may be hurt by them. He's a stone cutter, and he cuts a stone, all of a sudden the rock falls over and squishes him. He who splits logs may be endangered by them. Accidents happen. That's why we have this thing called OSHA and regulations and things like that. And, that's why we have fire rescue people, is because accidents take place. Accidents happen. Verse 10, if the axe is dull, and he does not sharpen its edge, then he must exert more strength. Now, this is a situation, and again, it can lead to an accident, but there's a point being made. Have your weapons ready. Might not be a weapon, might be a tool. Wisdom has the advantage of giving success. So notice, and just so you know, I came from a profession of fire rescue where we would use an axe, something sharp occasionally, and you wanted to have it sharp and ready to go. Yeah, well, gee, does that mean if I have an accident and I'm going to cut off my leg? Well, maybe, but the point is, a sharpened tool is actually safer. And this is the big thing, that you ought to work smarter, not harder. I used to tell my firefighters, if you're going to be dumb, you better be tough. But work smarter, not harder. You still might have to work hard, but be smart about it. Verse 11, if the serpent bites before being charmed, there is no profit for the charmer. Now, snake charming is not something I'm familiar with, but it was a thing back then, where you could sort of, I don't know if they would hypnotize it or sort of calm a serpent or do something, and that way they could touch it and they could do things, and the serpent wouldn't bite. But notice, if the serpent bites before being charmed, well, there's something wrong there. So wisdom only works if it's applied, and it only works if it's applied in a timely manner. Notice, before being charmed. Yeah. Doing it after the fact is too late. What's the saying that we have? closing the barn door after everything ran away, well, that's not so good. You want to do so in a timely manner. Verse 12, words from the mouth of a wise man are gracious, while the lips of a fool consume him. So notice you've got the wise versus the fool. The beginning of his talking, who's talking? Well, this is the fool. The beginning of his talking is folly, and the end of it is wicked madness. Yet the fool multiplies words. No man knows what will happen, and who can tell him what will come after him? Again, chance, can I say it this way? Chance favors the wise man because he's sort of making his chance by being a little bit more wise. Whereas the fool, and you can tell he's a fool because mm, silly things come out of his mouth. Um, the fool multiplies words. The wise man, he limits his words a bit. They're gracious, but also he's a bit more careful about what he says. Um, and somebody said, with a fool, if you're silent, they don't know you're a fool until you open your mouth and remove all doubt. So that's the point that's being given here. Who can tell what's going to come after the fool opens his mouth? Again, bad things can happen. Verse 15: the toil of a fool so wearies him that he does not even know how to go to a city. Now, I think probably something is lost in translation there, but it's probably the idea of the point. Fool doesn't know where he's going. Verse 16: woe to you, O land, whose king is a lad. Now, we were talking about fools, and before that, we were talking about governments and leaders and things like that. So, woe to you, O land, whose king is a lad. In other words, he's not grown up. He doesn't have the wisdom of the ages, and that's the idea. And notice those who would be advising him, whose princes feast in the morning. On the other hand, blessed are you, O land, whose king is of nobility. I think the idea here is that the king knows what he's doing, and whose princes eat at the appropriate time. They don't feast in the morning. They're not just party animals. They're doing their job for strength and not for drunkenness. It's good when leaders lead in a wise manner. That's the point that's being made. So, neglect in the kingdom is bad. We continue through indolence, the rafters sag. So, notice we go from a kingdom to a house. Through indolence, through laziness, through neglect, the rafters sag, and through slackness, the house leaks. So notice the indolence, the atzel, the atzel, I'm sorry, from atzel is the word for a sluggard. So through that's why I called it through laziness. The rafters sag. You can tell the house of the lazy man is falling apart, and it's falling apart because he hasn't taken care of it. So neglect in a kingdom is bad, but the neglect in a house is also bad. Verse 19, men prepare a meal for enjoyment, and wine makes life merry, and money is the answer to everything. Now you say, wait a second, suddenly we went in a bit of a different direction. This is also almost like a winsome little rhyme or something like that. And now I'm going to give you the Hebrew, um, and what I'm going to do, not because you're going to necessarily understand it. And the translation is okay. I'm not trying to overturn the translation. But I want you to do is hear it because this is actually a little bit of a pun. So notice people or men prepare a meal for enjoyment. Lishkok osim lakem, and I want you to hear the sounds. Liskok, the S sound and the ch sound, a little bit of a guttural there. Osim lachem. Lachem is the word for, here it's translated meal, but actually it's the word for bread. Like Beth Lachem is the house of bread. But it's not about the translation; it's about the sound. I want you to hear the s and the ch that are repeated, and then veyayin. That's the wine. Veyayin. But notice the yes sound. Yesmach kayim, and so the ya. I want you to hear that again, with the ch sound. Some repeated sounds that are given in both places, and then ve hakeshath ya aneh eth hakol. And again, the K sound, the K sound that are given. Now, what I want to do is give you the John Stevenson translation. It's not going to be exact, but what I've tried to do is capture not these sounds, but just the sort of repetition that we're seeing. Here's my version. Make bread for the spread, and wine to lift life, and silver serves for all else. Okay. It's a little winsome, it's a little humorous, it's a little bit of a pun. And what it's saying is enjoy life and just be ready for whatever might come. But enjoy yourself in the meantime. Verse 20, furthermore, in your bedchamber, do not curse. Okay, now we actually talked about this previously. And in your sleeping rooms, do not curse a rich man, for a bird of the heavens will carry the sound, and the winged creature will make the matter known. Watch out what you say in private, or we say sometimes walls have ears. If you say something, you know what? It's going to have a tendency to get out. So bite your tongue and don't say things that are hurtful because they might come back to bite you. Chapter 11, verse 1, cast your bread on the surface of the waters. Now, when you talk about waters, you can talk about waters that you drink, but waters in this sense, remember that the Jews were basically landlubbers. They didn't go out into the ocean. They didn't build ships and things like that. Sometimes they would hire other people to build ships. The Phoenicians were just up the coast, and they were good at that sort of thing. So cast your bread on the waters that's a dangerous place to put your bread. And so this is the idea of investing even maybe taking a chance, because investment could be chancy, for you will find it after many days. And maybe not immediately, but investments can pay off. However, there's a caveat in verse 2, divide your portion to 7 or even 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. So, yes, invest, but diversify your efforts, diversify your investments so that if something fails, you haven't lost it all. We say sometimes don't put all your eggs in one basket, and I think that's the idea here. So remember, we've been talking about chance. Chance eventually comes, and we're still dealing with that issue here in chapter 11. Verse 3, if the clouds are full, they pour out rain upon the earth, and whether a tree falls toward the south or toward the north, wherever the tree falls, there it lies. When things happen, that's just the way it's going to be. Verse 4, so we had the clouds, and there's certain things that are inevitable. If they're full, they're going to pour out. Whether a tree falls, there's randomness in life. There it lies. Verse 4, he who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. And so this is the person that he looks at chance and he says, I don't want to take a chance. I'm just going to sit here. But there's such a thing as calculated risk. So yes, there's the inevitability of things happening. There's a randomness, and you just have to roll with those things in life. Verse 5, just as you do not know the path of the wind and how bones are formed in the womb. Yes, I know that we have better understanding of that today than they did back then. But frankly, those things are still a little bit of a mystery. And the point is, in the womb of the pregnant woman, so you do not know the activity of God who makes all things. And God is in control. Yes, there is chance, but you can trust in him. And we look at things happening just by chance. He knows how it's going to work out. And in the New Testament, we have that promise that he causes all things to work together for good to those that love him and are called according to his purpose. That doesn't say all things are good. That doesn't say that chance happenings, both good and bad, don't take place. But they do work together for good because God is in control. And let me just say, and you're not. Verse 6, sow your seed in the morning and do not be idle in the evening. We already said back in verse 2, diversify your resources. Notice, for you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed or whether both of them alike will be good. So we said diversify your resources, but here, verse 6, diversify your efforts. You don't know what's going to work out. Continue to take chances, not foolish ones. To continue to diversify your resources and your efforts because you don't know what's going to work and what's not going to work. Let me say, there was something way back. It was quite a number of years ago, where I was asked, and I was sort of skeptical, to lead a certain ministry. And I sought counsel and I talked to folk, and my initial reaction, frankly, had been the best one. I said, I'm not the person for that, but I let myself be talked into it. And we started this. It was a ministry, and it was a neat idea, and it fell apart within within just a few months. I could see it wasn't going. Um, and it worked out wonderfully. What a glorious failure. Let me say what it was. It was actually starting a Bible Institute. I wasn't the guy to do that. Um, and right after that, Trinity International University, their Florida campus, moved right up to within a couple of miles of where we were located. And, there just didn't seem to be any reason to go on for that. And it was, like I said, it was a glorious defeat. Everything we did, both the library and the teachers, that all folded into Trinity International University, myself included, as well as the fellow who had asked me to start this. We all ended up teaching for Trinity for quite a number of years, and that was wonderful. That was a great experience. Notice, even those chance happenings, even those glorious failures, can work out wonderfully. Verse 7, the light is pleasant, and it is good for the eyes to see the sun. Indeed, if a man should live many years, let him rejoice in them all, and let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. Everything that is to come will be futility. So, light is good. Rejoice in it while you can. Enjoy it while you can. There are days of darkness coming. Death comes at the end. That's our theme here. Um, and everything at the end. Remember how we started the entire book? Uh, Emptiness of emptinesses. All is emptiness, and sure enough, emptiness is going to come at the end. At least under the sun. Everything you do will eventually, here on earth, fall apart because the earth is eventually going to fall apart. Verse 9, rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood, and follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes. Do those things you want to do. Not if what you want to do is rob banks, don't do that. Don't do evil things. But those things that you feel like where you've been gifted, those things that you love, those things that God has called you to do those things. Yet, and here's the aspect that tells you we're not talking about sinful things. Yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So, keeping that in mind, go out and do those things that are before you. So notice, enjoy the seasons of life, but remember that there is also a future judgment. So let that temper. Don't go do bad things, but go and do those good things. Verse 10, so remove grief and anger from your heart and put away pain from your body because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. I'm an old guy, so let me just say it went past fast. Life has gone by so very quickly, and it seems like just yesterday I was starting out, and it's been such a short time. Verse 12, chapter 12, verse 1, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come, and the years draw near, where you will say, I have no delight in them. So remember now, while you can. Now, that doesn't mean that once you get old, you should forget God. But he's saying life goes by so quickly. Remember God in the days of your youth, before the days where you say, I have no delight in them. Verse 2, before the sun and the light, the moon and the stars are darkened, and clouds return after the rain. So notice, before these things, before those things happen, remember him now. Verse 3, in the day that the watchmen of the house trembled. Now, we have a picture here. Notice the watchman of the house. We have a picture here of a house, symbolically speaking, because this isn't about houses. This is about something much more personal. This is about you, your body, but it's being likened to a house. And some houses are brand new and everything's new and it's working. And some houses, they get old after a while. So when we talk about the watchman of the house tremble, that's your body. Think about an old person, how he walks, and he's not so steady on his feet. And the mighty men stoop. You look at the posture of somebody who's old. The grinding ones stand idle because they are few. Think about in a house, you have like the grinding mill. In the human body, you have teeth that begin to fall out, and they didn't have dentistry work like we have today. And so the grinding ones stand idle because they are few. And those who look through windows grow dim. I'm actually looking at the screen at you guys through windows. I'm wearing glasses. They didn't have glasses back then. So this is speaking of your eyesight starts to go. Verse 4, and the doors on the street are shut as the sound of the grinding mill is low. Your hearing begins to go, and one will arise at the sound of the bird. Now, if you think if your hearing goes and you're getting old, then you're going to find it easier to sleep through the night. Actually, that's not. As you get older, at least it's been my experience, it gets harder, not easier, to sleep through the night. Um, and all the daughters of song will sing softly, and you can take that a couple of different ways. But I think the idea here is that both the hearing and yet when you do fall asleep, everybody's trying, oh, he's asleep. Let's not wake him up because he doesn't do so well. Verse 5, furthermore, men are afraid of a high place and terrors on the road. I used to do rock climbing. I don't do that anymore. Last summer, I went with my grandson to an indoor rock climbing wall. And I used to do it like out in the wild, but we went to an indoor rock climbing wall. And I thought, well, I can still do this in my 70s, foolish me. And I got about halfway up. I'd done a couple of climbs, and then I was doing a harder one. And I saw this handhold up there, and I said, I can jump to that. And I jumped up, and my hand went in the right place, and I felt my middle finger go crunch. And I didn't bother to go get it x-rayed, but it hurt, and eventually it healed. But let me just say, I don't bounce like I used to. Um, Notice the next line, the almond tree blossoms. You have to look at an almond tree. This is that white tree, and when it blossoms, the whole tree turns white. And I've noticed the color of my hair changing colors. It's getting lighter. No, I'm not getting blonde. I'm getting gray-haired. The grasshopper drags himself along. The bounce has gone out of your step. And this final one needs some explanation. The caperberry is ineffective. I can't think of a gentle way to do that, to describe this. So let me just say Viagra no longer works. Okay. All things about growing old. For man goes to his eternal home while mourners go about in the street. Notice the end of the story of this house that's falling apart is that it collapses, that your body collapses and is no longer here. Remember, we start off, remember, and so notice that's not being repeated, but the idea is still there. Don't forget the original, what kicked us off back in verse 1. Remember him before the silver cord is broken and the golden bowl is crushed, the pitcher by the well is shattered, and the wheel at the cistern is crushed. Those are all descriptions of the final, when your heartbeat stops, when you finally die. Verse 7, then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. And so at the end, you die. And so what we've seen here in this fifth sermon, now we're not finished with the book, but we're finished with the sermon. There's going to be an epilogue in just a minute. That it was all about investing your life, and we talked about investments and live while you're alive, that there is a certainty of death, and because of the brevity of this life, that man ought to fear the Lord and to follow his word. Yes, enjoy those things that God has given you, but keep God in mind. That was the sermon. But we're not done with the book. So let's just take a few more minutes and just finish off the book. Chapter 12, verse 8. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. That's how we started the book. Vanity of vanity. Avel ha'avel. Verse 9, in addition to being a wise man, the preacher, and we haven't heard too much about the preacher. We saw him back in chapter 1. We saw him briefly in chapter 7, just a passing reference. And here we see him at the end. And we noted that Is this the author speaking about the preacher? Is this the preacher speaking about himself in the third person? We're not sure. But the preacher also taught the people knowledge. And he pondered, searched out, and arranged many proverbs, and we've been reading about them. Verse 10, the preacher sought to find delightful words, and sometimes they were humorous, and to write words of truth correctly. And so we've come to the end of that journey. Verse 11, the words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. And the shepherd isn't the preacher, the shepherd is the good shepherd. He's someone else. Verse 12, but beyond this, my son, be warned. The writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. I think that's a something else for a person who's a writer to write that. Notice he didn't write that at the beginning of the book. He wrote it at the end of the book. You had to read all the way through to get to that because he didn't want you to stop reading. He didn't want you to get tired of endless devotion before you'd finish reading this. But still, he's got an insider's task to that, an insider's take that about the writing of books and about how, yes, that can be tiring to both the writer and even to the reader. However, we're not done. The conclusion. So we come now to the conclusion. The conclusion, when all has been heard, here it is. Here's what it's all about. Here's the big deal, the takeaway. Fear God and keep his commandments. Really? Yes, because this applies to every person. Now, some people have looked at that. Some scholars have looked at that and said, somebody must have added that later on. No, I don't think they added it later on. We've seen that same message all throughout. In every sermon, this came up. Yes, there's things that happen by chance. Yes, everything looks empty from the down under the sun. But when God enters the picture, things make a bit more sense. Not that everything is explained, but you fear the Lord and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person, and I think it applies to every sermon that he's given. Verse 14, now we see the reasoning behind it. For God will bring every act to judgment. Everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil, not necessarily here under the sun. But notice, there's a final judgment. And this is our big suggestion. There's more to the picture than is under the sun. Now, this brings us to our final question. The question is, where do you find the Gospels in Ecclesiastes? Is the gospel there? Is it hinted at? Does this drive me? And here I think is the answer. Ecclesiastes tells us that there is a cross-shaped hole in our universe. There's something missing that hasn't been specifically mentioned, that had not yet been revealed. Ecclesiastes, I think, drives us, and I think it's an incredibly relevant book for today because it drives us to God, and it drives us to the cross. It shows us the need that we have. Without the cross, life is futile and without meaning. And there is no goal or direction to the seasons of life. And wisdom is an empty pursuit. Cross, power and wealth will pass away, but you've been bought with a price. The cross is there, and the world groans in futility, but finds its redemption in the power of the resurrection. You see, we live in the post-resurrection world. We have seen the one who came and died and rose again from the dead. Ecclesiastes says that it's Friday and bad things are happening. And the cross and the resurrection that comes after tells us, yes, life is empty. Yes, eternity is incomprehensible. Yes, wisdom isn't worth the pursuit. Yes, wealth and power will pass away. Yes, death is the end. Yes, it's Friday. But the gospel says Sunday's coming. And death has been overcome. And we live on the other side, not under the sun, but with the sun. We live on the other side where there is a continuing hope.